Her daughter sent a selfie while on a camping trip with her grandparents. But when her mother zoomed in on the picture, she froze and started to panic. Lydia Heron sat in her study with the afternoon sunlight filtering through half-drawn blinds. She tried to focus on the spreadsheet open on her laptop, a critical project for a potential promotion, yet her mind kept wandering. With a sigh, she rubbed her tired eyes and shifted positions in her chair for the 10th time in the past hour. "This isn't working," she muttered to herself, shoving away from the desk. The house was too quiet. Normally, her 5-year-old daughter, Hazel, would be bouncing around, chattering about her day at kindergarten or demanding to be pushed on the backyard swing. But Hazel was away camping with her grandparents, and the silence was deafening. Lydia padded down the hallway to the master bedroom and into the adjoining bathroom. She opened the cabinet above the sink, her fingers trembling slightly as they reached for the orange prescription bottle tucked behind the mouthwash. Just as her fingertips brushed against the plastic, a voice from the doorway startled her. "Lydia, don't!" Nick, her husband, stood in the bathroom doorway with an expression that was a mixture of disappointment and concern. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it, a habit when he was worried. "I know what you're thinking," he said softly as he stepped into the small bathroom. "But you promised 4 months clean, remember?" Lydia's hand hovered near the bottle, trembling slightly. "I can't focus, Nick. This report is due tomorrow, and I haven't written a single coherent paragraph." Her voice cracked. "Just one pill to help me concentrate." Nick gently took her hand and lowered it from the cabinet. "If you take one now, you'll take another tomorrow. Then we're back to square one, and those therapy sessions we've been going to every week will have been for nothing." Lydia's shoulders slumped as she closed the cabinet door, catching another glimpse of her tired face in the mirror. "I know you're right. She trailed off, uncertain how to explain the anxious energy coursing through her. "You're worried about Hazel," Nick said, leading her back to their bedroom and sitting beside her on the edge of the bed. "That's what this is really about, isn't it?" Lydia nodded, feeling slightly embarrassed at being so transparent. This was the longest Hazel had been away from them. 2 nights was already pushing it, but 3, and they'd only heard from her once since they left the previous morning. "Mom and Dad have taken her camping plenty of times before," Nick reminded her gently, yet firmly. "They're experienced. They've toured half the country in that camper van." "Yes, but never for 3 nights with a toddler," Lydia insisted. "And your parents aren't exactly young anymore." Nick countered softly. "Hazel is 5 and full of energy. What if she wanders off while they're napping? What if we trust that my parents, who raised me and my 2 siblings without major incident, can handle one kindergartner for 3 days?" Lydia pleaded. Nick interrupted with a slight smile, massaging her tense shoulders with strong fingers working at the knots that had formed there. "Remember why they offered to take her in the first place," he reminded her. "I could finish this project and possibly land the promotion." "Exactly," she sighed. "My parents adore Hazel, and they wanted to give you this time to focus. They're probably having the time of their lives, showing her all the camping tricks they've picked up over the years." As Nick continued to massage her shoulders, Lydia felt some of the tension ebbing away. He was right, of course. June and Charles, Nick's parents, were experienced campers who doted on their only granddaughter. "You know," Nick said playfully, leaning closer in her ear, "if you finish your work early, we might actually get some alone time. When was the last time we had the house to ourselves for more than a few hours?" Despite her anxiety, Lydia found herself smiling. "You make a compelling argument." She took a deep breath. "You're right. I'm sorry for trying to take the medication. 4 months is the longest I've gone without it, and I don't want to break that streak." With renewed determination, she squared her shoulders and decided that the pills would remain in the cabinet where they belonged. There were promises to keep, to Nick, her therapist, and most importantly, to herself. With Nick by her side, she walked out of the bathroom, leaving the pills behind. Back in the bedroom, Lydia's phone chimed with a notification. She hurried to the bedside table where it was charging and saw a new message from June, Nick's mother. "It's from your mom," Nick said eagerly as he opened the chat. A blurry selfie appeared on the screen alongside a string of nonsensical letters. Lydia couldn't help but chuckle. Hazel had clearly gotten hold of June's phone. "Look at this," she said, showing Nick the phone. "Hazel's learning how to take selfies now." Nick peered over her shoulder and laughed. Kids these days and technology. She's only 5 and already more tech-savvy than my parents. The picture was partially blurred, yet Lydia could make out a campsite in the background. More importantly, Hazel's grinning face, with her blonde curls wild around her cherubic features, was visible. Hazel looked happy and safe, which eased some of Lydia's anxiety. She was about to call back when another picture arrived. This one was clearer. Hazel, with her tongue out in classic 5-year-old fashion, was shown against a backdrop of a camper van and June and Charles sitting around a fireplace. However, there was someone else there too, a man that Lydia did not recognize at first. Then she sensed something eerily familiar about him. Frowning, Lydia zoomed in on the man's face. Her heart began to pound as recognition dawned. "Nick," she called out in a tight voice, "come look at this." Nick, who had returned to the living room couch to read the news on his tablet, called back. "What is it? Just come here, please." When Nick returned, Lydia thrust the phone into his hands. "Do you see what I see?" Nick squinted at the screen, pinching and zooming to get a better look at the man. "Looks like some random camper to me. Probably another family they met at the site." "No," Lydia insisted, taking the phone back and zooming in again. "Look more carefully. That's Caleb. Caleb, your ex-husband." Nick's tone was skeptical. "I don't think so, Lydia. Caleb was always clean-cut in his hair, but this guy's light brown hair now," Lydia interrupted firmly. "Despite the changes in his appearance, the hair, the fuller beard, I recognized the shape of his eyes and the set of his jaw. This was definitely Caleb." She checked the calendar on her phone. "It's been 5 years," she murmured more to herself than to Nick. 5 years since he went to prison for domestic violence and drugs. Nick's expression softened as he remembered Lydia's history with Caleb and the abuse she had suffered when she was pregnant with Hazel, the night Caleb had nearly choked her to death before the police arrived. "If that really is Caleb," Lydia continued in a trembling voice, "then he must have been released. But why didn't anyone inform me? I should have been notified." Panic rising in her chest, Lydia tried calling June, but there was no answer. She tried Charles next with the same result. "Let's go," she said to Nick, already grabbing her purse. Nick hesitated. "Lydia, are you sure?" "Let's go," she repeated urgently. "If Caleb is there with Hazel, we need to get to them right now." Finally, sensing the gravity of the situation, Nick nodded. He rushed downstairs to start the car, while Lydia grabbed a few more necessities. Before following him, however, Lydia ducked back into the bathroom. She opened the cabinet again and stared at the medication. After a minute of internal struggle, she grabbed the entire bottle and shoved it into her purse. "Lydia, let's go," Nick called from downstairs. She hurried to the driveway, where Nick was waiting with the car engine already running. As she slid into the passenger seat, she felt the weight of the pill bottle in her purse like a guilty secret. "Trinity Pines is about an hour away," Nick said as they pulled out of the driveway. "Try calling your in-laws again while I drive." Lydia nodded, clutching her phone tightly. She tried not to imagine the worst, but if Caleb was really at the campsite with her daughter, nothing good could come of it. Trinity Pines Campground was nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, a peaceful, rustic retreat surrounded by towering pines and meandering hiking trails. Lydia and Nick had visited the area many times with Hazel, and June and Charles had mentioned they would spend 2 nights there before moving to another part for their 3rd night. "I still don't understand how Caleb could be there," Nick said as they sped down the highway. "Do my parents know him? Have they ever met him?" Lydia asked. Nick shook his head, keeping his eyes on the road. "I don't think so. They're away in their camper so often. They're not really up to date with what's happening around town. Maybe it's just someone who looks like him," Lydia suggested, trying to calm herself. But deep down, she knew better. That was Caleb in the photo. As they continued driving in anxious silence, Lydia's thoughts drifted back to the night Caleb was arrested. She had been 8 months pregnant, her belly enormous and tender. The memory of his hands around her throat, squeezing as his face contorted with rage, was something she had tried for years to forget if the neighbors hadn't called the police. "Look," Nick said suddenly, pulling Lydia from her dark memories. "Police cars." "Oh, God," she whispered, clutching the dashboard as Nick accelerated, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. They parked hastily and rushed toward the cluster of police officers and rangers gathered near the center of the campground. The parking area was buzzing with activity, with another police car having joined the others. Lydia could see uniformed officers talking to various campers. Her eyes frantically scanned the area for June and Charles's camper van. It wasn't hard to spot them. They were seated at a picnic table, speaking to a detective who was taking notes. Charles had an ice pack pressed against his temple, and June looked pale and shaken. "There," Nick pointed to a familiar blue and white vehicle parked near a cluster of pine trees. "And there's my dad." As they approached, Lydia overheard Charles describing what had happened. He introduced himself as Collins. Charles was saying in a trembling voice, "Seemed like a decent fellow, very kind to us, and especially to Hazel. Last night we even had a barbecue together. He came with a woman named Maya." June added, her voice quavering, "I think elegant woman, but friendly too. They were both so good with children. Since yesterday, they've been keeping Hazel company, playing with her, drawing and coloring." During the barbecue last night, Charles continued, "He told Hazel all sorts of children's stories, and he was a great cook. The meat was so tender that Hazel, who usually isn't fond of meat, finished her entire dinner. We thought they were good people." The detective nodded, still taking notes. "And what happened this morning?" Charles lowered the ice pack, revealing a nasty bruise. "After breakfast, they said they were leaving soon. Hazel was upset and asked to play with them one more time. They promised not to go far, saying they were just going to pick leaves and flowers like they had yesterday." June then added, "I was cleaning inside the camper, arranging Hazel's things, while Charles said, 'Yeah, I was reading outside. I didn't realize I was so engrossed in my book that I didn't see them getting her into their vehicle. By the time I heard the engine start and looked up, they were already pulling away. I ran after them," he said, touching his bruised face gingerly. "Got to the driver's side before they could leave the campground. Collins, if that's even his real name, got out and hit me multiple times. I couldn't stop him." June reached over to take her husband's hand. "I called the police immediately, but they've been gone for more than an hour now." Detective Rollins spoke up. "Child abductors typically try to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the abduction site. We put out an alert for the camper van, but without a license plate number, it's challenging. Do you have any photos of this Collins person?" Nick asked. June shook her head sadly. "We don't really take many pictures when we're camping. It's not our habit." Lydia's hand flew to her mouth. "The selfie. Hazel sent us a selfie from your phone, June." The man was in the background. She fumbled with her phone, pulling up the clearer of the two photos that Hazel had sent and handed it to Detective Rollins. I think it might be my ex-husband, Caleb Winters." The detective studied the photo carefully. "Why would you think your ex-husband would take your daughter?" Lydia took a deep breath, aware of all eyes on her. "Caleb went to prison 5 years ago for domestic violence and drug possession. I was 35 weeks pregnant with Hazel when she swallowed hard. When he assaulted me, I nearly died. If the police hadn't arrived when they did." She pulled up an old photo of Caleb from social media and showed it to the detective. "The man in Hazel's selfie looks different. He has hair now, and he's heavier, but I'm almost certain it's him." Detective Rollins compared the two photos thoughtfully. "There are similarities, though it's hard to be 100% certain given the quality of the image and the changes you mentioned. If this is indeed your ex-husband, Mrs. Heron, it would make sense that he's targeting his biological child." Another officer approached the group, speaking quietly to Detective Rollins before addressing everyone. "We've spoken with other campers and the campground manager. Several people reported seeing a camper van matching the description, heading toward town, not up the mountain as we initially thought." Lydia's phone suddenly vibrated, displaying an unknown number. She dismissed it, assuming it was a marketing call from a bank or insurance company, but when it rang immediately again, she reconsidered. "Excuse me," she said to the detective. "I need to take this call." Stepping away from the group, Lydia found a quiet corner near a cluster of pine trees. Her hand trembled as she answered, "Hello." A chilling voice on the other end instructed her to keep her voice down and listen carefully. It was unmistakably Caleb. In the background, she could hear Hazel chattering excitedly about something. "Caleb," she whispered with her free hand curling into a fist, "what have you done? Where's Hazel?" "She's fine," he replied in an eerily calm tone. "She's having the time of her life, actually. Aren't you, sweetheart?" His voice grew slightly distant, as if he had turned to speak to Hazel. Lydia heard her daughter's cheerful reply, almost breaking her resolve. "Caleb, please," she pleaded quietly, "don't do this. She doesn't even know you." "That's exactly the problem, isn't it?" His voice hardened. "My own daughter doesn't know me. 5 years of her life gone. Time I'll never get back. You have no right." "I have every right. I'm her biological father," he snapped, cutting her off. "Now listen closely. I don't want to hurt Hazel. I didn't take her to harm her. I just want to talk. You and I. We have unfinished business." Lydia glanced back at the group huddled around Detective Rollins. Nick was watching her with concern etched across his face. "Why should I believe you?" she snapped. "You took my daughter. You knew she'd be here with my in-laws. You planned this, didn't you? Because if you don't come alone, if you tell the police or that husband of yours about this call, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of mother you really are." His voice lowered dangerously. "I'll tell them everything, Lydia. Every dirty little secret." Her blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? You can't threaten me. The police won't believe anything you say." Caleb let out a humiliating laugh. "Won't they have you forgotten what you did? Cheating on me with Nick while you were pregnant, the amount of alcohol and drugs you consumed even though you knew you were carrying our child, or how about the money you stole from your company to feed your addiction?" Lydia's legs nearly gave out. She leaned against a nearby tree for support, making sure she was still out of earshot from the others. "That's all in the past," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Nick and I got help. We've been clean for 4 months. And for 4 whole months," Caleb mocked. "Congratulations. But those company funds you embezzled, that little accounting trick that got 3 innocent employees fired, that doesn't just go away, Lydia." She closed her eyes, shame and fear battling within her. "What do you want, Caleb?" she managed. "I told you I want to talk. Meet me at the Sunshine Cafe in Oakage. You know it. My sister owns it. Come alone. Bring Hazel's documents, her birth certificate, medical records, everything." Suspicion rising, Lydia asked, "Why would I bring her documents?" "You'll understand when you get here. And, Lydia, don't make me wait. Don't call this number back, and don't try anything clever. Remember what's at stake." The line went dead. Lydia tried immediately to call back, but as Caleb had warned her, the number had already been disconnected. She stared at her phone, her mind racing through impossible options. If she told the police about the call, Caleb might follow through on his threat. The embezzlement had happened over 5 years ago, but the statute of limitations hadn't expired. She could face criminal charges, lose her job, lose custody of Hazel, everything she had worked so hard to build. But if she went alone, was she walking into a trap? What did Caleb really want after all this time? Taking a deep breath to compose herself, Lydia returned to the group. Nick immediately moved to her side. "Who was that?" he asked. "You were on the phone for a while." Lydia's mind raced for a plausible lie. "It was from the office," she said, avoiding his gaze. "They're demanding that report. I was supposed to email them. They're not happy with the delay." Nick looked skeptical, but did not press the issue. Around them, the police had cordoned off an area with yellow tape, and more officers had arrived. The detective approached with a serious expression. "We've set up roadblocks and issued an Amber alert for Hazel. It would be best for all of you to go home and rest. We'll update you as soon as we have any information." Lydia nodded absently, her mind already formulating a plan to get away and meet Caleb. "I'm going to take my parents to the hospital," Nick said, putting his arm around Lydia's shoulders. "Charles needs to get that head wound properly examined, and they're both pretty shaken up." Charles and June were already being led to an ambulance, the older man still clutching the ice pack to his head. "I need to take their camper back," Nick continued. "What about you?" Lydia saw her opportunity. "I think I'll go home. I need to finish that work project." Nick looked at her incredulously. "Now, in the middle of all this?" Did you tell your office what happened? It's just a small business thing. I need to deal with it. Lydia insisted. I'll catch up with you at the hospital in a few hours. That promotion is still important, Nick. Nick frowned, but eventually nodded. All right, if that's what you need to do. They said their goodbyes to the police, promising to stay in touch if there were any developments. Lydia watched as the ambulance departed with June and Charles, and Nick followed behind in their camper van. Once alone in her car, the facade Lydia had been maintaining crumbled. She gripped the steering wheel tightly as panic and anxiety overtook her. Tears streamed down her face as she pounded the steering wheel in frustration. Why is this happening? Why now? She sobbed to the empty car. Her gaze fell on her purse sitting on the passenger seat, and the bottle of pills she had taken from home seemed to call to her, promising instant relief from the overwhelming stress. With shaking hands, Lydia reached for the purse and withdrew the bottle. She twisted off the cap and shook a tablet in her palm, staring at it with a mixture of longing and self-loathing. She remembered her promise to Nick, the 4 months of sobriety they had fought so hard to maintain. But this was different. This was an emergency. She needed to be clear-headed to save Hazel, and her anxiety was making that impossible. Rationalizing her decision, Lydia broke the tablet in half. A smaller dose wouldn't be as dangerous, she told herself. It would just take the edge off and help her focus without compromising her driving ability. She swallowed the half pill dry, waiting for the familiar calming effect to wash over her. After a few minutes, she felt her racing heart slow and the panic receded, replaced by a determined focus. With steady hands now, Lydia started the car and pulled out of the campground parking lot, heading for home. The drive from Trinity Pines back to their house would have normally taken just under an hour, but Lydia made it in 40 minutes, her mind too preoccupied to notice her speedometer creeping well above the limit on the winding mountain roads. The house felt unnervingly quiet as she entered. She went straight to the master bedroom, where a small fireproof lockbox held all their important documents. Her fingers fumbled with the combination lock, requiring 3 attempts before it finally opened. Inside were their passports, social security cards, insurance policies, and Hazel's documents, her birth certificate, social security card, immunization records, and medical history. Lydia rifled through the papers, organizing Hazel's documents into a manila folder. As she worked, questions tumbled through her mind. Why did Caleb want these papers? Was he planning to take Hazel away permanently out of state or even out of the country? I won't let that happen, she whispered fiercely to the empty room. Glancing at the clock, Lydia realized she needed to get moving. Oakage was about 30 minutes away in the opposite direction from her home. She gathered Hazel's documents, took a deep breath, and headed back to her car. The Sunshine Cafe was situated in the heart of Oakage, its cheerful yellow awning visible from a block away. Adjacent to the cafe was a colorful playground designed to keep children entertained while their parents enjoyed coffee and pastries. Lydia parked across the street, scanning for the familiar camper van that belonged to Caleb and Maya, but it was nowhere to be seen. Instead, only a sleek black luxury car sat by the curb. Then she spotted Hazel in the sandbox. Her heart leaped at the sight of her daughter safe, smiling, and carefree. But the relief shattered just as quickly. A woman, presumably Maya, had seen her. Without hesitation, the woman ushered Hazel toward the indoor playground, her movements swift and purposeful, as though she had been waiting for Lydia to arrive. At least she's okay, Lydia murmured to herself, deciding to leave Hazel's documents in the car for now. She wouldn't hand them over until she absolutely had to. As Lydia crossed the street, a woman with sleek dark hair and designer sunglasses approached her. The woman had Caleb's same jawline and carried herself with the confident air of someone accustomed to luxury. Maya, Lydia acknowledged coldly. He's waiting inside. The woman replied with a curt nod and a gesture toward a private room often used for children's birthday parties. This way, she said. The cafe was quiet that day, with only a few patrons scattered at the outdoor tables. Inside the private room, Caleb sat at a table, looking more polished than the man Lydia remembered. Prison had changed him physically. He was leaner, his once bald head now covered with light brown hair, and his formerly clean-shaven face sported a well-groomed beard. "Lydia," he greeted, his voice carrying the same smooth charm that had once captivated her. "It's been a long time." Lydia felt the effects of her medication wearing off, and anxiety crept back as she faced her ex-husband. "Hazel," she demanded, forgoing pleasantries, "she'll start looking for me soon." "She's perfectly fine, as you saw for yourself," Caleb assured her. "Maya will keep her entertained while we talk." "What do you want?" Caleb asked, as Lydia took a seat across from him but maintained her distance. He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers, and said coolly, "I want to discuss an arrangement with you. It's quite simple, really. I want to tell Hazel the truth, that I'm her father. I want her to live with me." "That's absurd," Lydia exclaimed. "You can't just show up after 5 years and expect you would still get to see her." Caleb interrupted smoothly. "Once a week supervised visits. You get to continue your life with Nick, the man you cheated with while you were still with me, and I get to raise my daughter. It's fair considering the circumstances." And if Lydia refused, Caleb added matter-of-factly, "Then I'll report everything you did to the police." Lydia challenged, "What about you? You did all those things too?" "Caleb, you took drugs and drank alcohol alongside me. You never tried to stop me, even though you knew I was pregnant. We were both terrible, both not ready for a baby." Calmly, Caleb replied, "The difference is that I didn't steal thousands from my company, and I didn't cheat on you." Desperate, Lydia begged, "Please, Caleb, I don't take illegal drugs anymore. I've been through therapy. I have prescribed medication now, and I haven't even taken that for 4 months." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Just 4 months after 5 years? So you were still taking drugs while caring for our baby?" she insisted. "My therapist said it was safe. I only took it after Hazel was asleep, and I always dumped my milk afterward when I was breastfeeding. In prison, I got therapy too," Caleb said with a hint of pride. "I've been completely clean for over 3 years now. If anyone deserves her, it's me." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "But that's beside the point. Here's what's going to happen tonight. Hazel stays with me. You tell her I'm her father, her real father. Tomorrow, you don't come and pick her up. You can visit her on Saturday. And if I don't agree," Lydia asked, though she already knew she had no real choice, "then I call the police and tell them everything about your past." Caleb replied simply, "Your choice, Lydia." Feeling cornered, Lydia reluctantly nodded. "Fine, I'll tell her." They walked together to the playground, where Hazel was busy building a sandcastle with Maya. When the little girl spotted Lydia, her face lit up. "Mommy," she squealed, running to Lydia and throwing her arms around her legs. Lydia knelt down and hugged her daughter tightly, savoring the feel of her small, warm body. "Hi, sweetie. Are you having fun?" she asked, and Hazel nodded enthusiastically. "Mr. Collins and Ms. Mayer took me camping. We saw deer, picked flowers, and had marshmallows," Hazel cheerfully recounted. The innocent tone in her daughter's voice made what Lydia had to do next even more painful. Taking a deep breath, she said, "Hazel, sweetie, I need to tell you something important. This man isn't really Mr. Collins. His name is Caleb, and he's your father." Hazel's brow furrowed in confusion. "But Daddy Nick is my daddy." "Yes, Nick is your daddy too," Lydia explained, struggling to find the right words. "But Caleb is your real daddy, from when you were a tiny baby in my tummy." Hazel processed this with the simple logic of a 5-year-old. "So I have 2 daddies?" "Yes," Lydia confirmed, relief washing over her that Hazel wasn't upset. The little girl seemed to accept this new reality with remarkable ease. She looked up at Caleb with curious eyes. "Can I go to your house? Do you have toys?" Caleb smiled as he knelt down to Hazel's level. "I do have toys and even a swimming pool. Would you like to see it?" Hazel's eyes widened with excitement, but then her expression changed. "But I want Mommy to come too. I miss Mommy." Lydia's heart broke at her daughter's words. "I can't come tonight, sweetie. I have work to do, but you're going to stay at Daddy Caleb's house tonight, and I'll come get you tomorrow." Hazel's face fell, and she began to protest. "No, I want you to come with me." Seeing her daughter's distress, Lydia quickly amended her plan. "Okay, how about this? I'll go with you to Caleb's house, and then I'll leave. Would that be okay?" Hazel considered the compromise for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. Okay, wonderful, Caleb said, standing up. He turned to Lydia in a hushed tone so that Hazel couldn't hear. Don't forget her documents. You'd better cooperate, or I will involve my lawyer. Lydia nodded mutely, her heart heavy as she watched Hazel take Caleb's hand willingly. In that moment, she realized she had just agreed to hand her daughter over to her abuser and felt powerless to change it. Hazel clambered into Caleb's car with Mia, chattering excitedly about the swimming pool and the toys that might be waiting at the house, while Lydia returned to her own vehicle, her movements mechanical and her mind numb with the weight of what was happening. Once inside her car with the door shut against the world, Lydia finally allowed herself to feel the full force of her despair. Tears flowed freely as she pounded the steering wheel in anger rather than panic. How could I let this happen? How could I agree to give her up? She whispered to the empty car. The crushing sense of helplessness overwhelmed her as she realized she faced two impossible choices. Either surrender Hazel to Caleb and lose her daughter forever, or confess her past crimes and lose Hazel while also going to jail. Either way, Hazel would grow up without her mother. Lydia tried to think through her options rationally. If she gave Caleb the documents, he could potentially testify in court that she had willingly surrendered Hazel to him. With a good lawyer, he might even be able to secure full custody. And then what would he allow her to see of Hazel at all? Or would he take the child and disappear, ensuring Lydia never saw her daughter again? On the other hand, if she went to the police and Nick confessed everything, Caleb would be arrested for kidnapping since he had no legal custody rights. But then she'd face prosecution for her past crimes. Would she go to jail for how long? And what would happen to Hazel in the meantime? The stress and anxiety built within her until Lydia found herself reaching for her purse again, seeking the false comfort of the pills. She opened the bottle and stared at the remaining half-tablet from earlier, then shook out a whole pill to join it. 1.5 doses would help numb the pain, she told herself, and help her think more clearly. She placed the pills on her tongue and swallowed them. But then, after a moment when the effects began to settle in, a wave of self-disgust crashed over her. Is this really who I want to be? A woman who turns to drugs at the first sign of trouble. A mother who isn't strong enough to fight for her child without chemical assistance. No, she declared aloud, spitting the pills into her hand. I will not do this. I am better than this. With sudden determination, Lydia threw open her car door and hurried to the nearest trash bin. She gagged herself with her fingers, forcing herself to vomit up any remnants of the earlier half pills still in her system. I have to deserve my daughter, she told herself between heaves. I can't fall off the wagon. I have to keep it together. Once she had purged as much as possible, Lydia returned to her car, gulping water from a bottle in the cup holder to rinse the acrid taste from her mouth. Her head was clearer now, and her resolve had grown stronger. She would go to Caleb's house, the place she once called home during their marriage, but she would not give up, not on herself, and certainly not on Hazel. Starting the engine, Lydia pulled away from the curb, following Caleb's car toward the confrontation that awaited her. Caleb's house stood on a quiet street lined with manicured lawns and tasteful landscaping. It was larger than the home Lydia shared with Nick, with a sprawling backyard featuring an in-ground pool, a luxury that would certainly appeal to a 5-year-old. As Lydia pulled into the driveway, she could hear Hazel's laughter drifting through an open window. Caleb's car was already parked in the garage, its doors still open from their recent arrival. Lydia sat in her car for a moment, gathering her courage. The envelope containing Hazel's documents lay on the passenger seat. She picked it up, then decided to leave it in the car for now. She wouldn't surrender those papers until she absolutely had to. The house was exactly as she remembered it, though the decor had been updated. As she stepped through the front door, memories washed over her, some good, many bad. This was where she had lived during her darkest days, where her addiction had nearly destroyed her. Following the sound of Hazel's voice, Lydia made her way to what had once been the nursery, although Hazel had never actually lived in it. Caleb had converted it into a playroom filled with toys and books that would delight any child. Maya was nowhere to be seen. "Mommy," Hazel exclaimed when she spotted Lydia running to hug her. "Look at all the toys," the little girl said brightly. Caleb looked up from where he was setting up a dollhouse as Maya went to buy supplies for Hazel. Lydia took in the newly decorated room, perfect for a toddler girl with pastel colors and whimsical artwork on the walls. Her eyes drifted to a familiar cabinet in the corner, and suddenly she was transported back 5 years. That cabinet top was where she and Nick had once hidden their shame and regret. She had been so lost, so confused, and afraid of the impending responsibility of motherhood. Drunk and high, she had made the worst mistake of her life on that very cabinet. As if reading her thoughts, Caleb smiled smugly. "So you remember," he said, but Lydia ignored him and moved purposefully toward the cabinet. She placed the envelope of documents on top of it, and her attention was caught by a framed photograph hanging there. It was a picture of Caleb and Maya when they were younger, their arms around each other. Hanging from the frame was a heart-shaped bracelet that stirred something in Lydia's memory. On impulse, she opened the heart locket and found inside a photograph of Caleb and Maya embracing in a way that no brother and sister should. The sight triggered a flood of buried memories. She remembered that she hadn't cheated on Caleb on a random impulse. She had found this same bracelet in Mia's room one day, opened it, and seen the truth of Caleb's incestuous relationship with his sister. Heartbroken and disgusted, she had turned to Nick for comfort, which eventually led to their affair. Her memory of that time was foggy, clouded by drugs, alcohol, and the trauma that had followed. But now it all came rushing back with crystal clarity. With renewed determination, Lydia snatched up the documents and the bracelet and turned to leave the room. "What are you doing?" Caleb demanded, rising to his feet. "Where are you going with those papers?" Lydia ignored him as she strode purposefully toward the front door. Caleb abandoned the dollhouse and rushed after her, leaving Hazel alone with her new toys. As Lydia reached her car, she pulled out her phone and dialed Nick's number. It went to voicemail, but she left an urgent message. "Nick, it's me. I'm at Caleb's house with Hazel. There's something I need to tell you." Before she could say more, Caleb caught up to her, snatched the phone from her hand, switched it off, and threw it away. "What do you think you're doing?" he growled, his charming facade crumbling to reveal the violence beneath. Lydia tried to wrestle free, clutching the bracelet and documents tightly. "Let go of me, Caleb," she cried. His response was a backhanded slap, so powerful that it split her lip and sent her sprawling onto the driveway. "Mommy!" Hazel screamed from the doorway, having followed them outside. "Hazel, go back inside!" Lydia cried, blood trickling from her lip. "Go to your room. It's not safe." But Hazel stood frozen, eyes wide with terror at the scene unfolding before her. Caleb loomed over Lydia, noticing the bracelet in her grip. "Where did you get that?" he demanded in a dangerously low voice. "You cheated on me first," Lydia spat, holding up the locket. "With your own sister, and now you two are planning to take my daughter away." "Never." Caleb's face twisted with rage as he grabbed the bracelet, yanking it from her grasp with such force that the chain snapped. Lydia used the thick envelope of documents to hit Caleb's face, though it was an ineffective weapon. With a snarl, Caleb grabbed her by the throat, his fingers digging into the same flesh he had nearly crushed 5 years earlier. "You know nothing," he hissed as he dragged her to her feet and into the house, leaving Hazel crying on the front step. Caleb then pulled Lydia into the bedroom, throwing her onto the bed and locking the door behind them. As she gasped for breath, he loomed over her, his eyes wild with fury. "You think you can threaten me?" he growled, climbing on top of her as she struggled beneath him. "You think you can take my daughter away from me again?" They fought, crashing into the edge of the bed in a blur of tangled limbs and raw panic. Lydia clawed at his arm, trying to twist free as Caleb forced her backward with an iron grip. She managed to wrench one arm loose and aimed a wild kick at his shin, connecting hard. He grunted in pain and stumbled for a moment, and she tried to scramble away toward the door, toward any escape, but he caught her ankle and yanked, sending her sprawling onto the carpet. Lydia's elbow slammed into the floor, pain shooting up her arm as she cried out, flipping on her back just in time to see him looming over her, his face flushed and his breathing heavy. Then, in the distance, a siren wailed, growing steadily louder. Caleb froze and then cursed. "You called the police," he accused, his grip tightening around her throat. Lydia clawed at his hands, fighting for air. "No," she managed to choke out. "Nick must have gotten my message." With a furious roar, Caleb snatched an old baseball bat leaning against the bedside table, a leftover from his college years, and raised it above his head, eyes blazing. "I hope you never get to watch Hazel grow up," he snarled. The last thing Lydia saw before everything went black was the bat swinging toward her skull and the hatred burning in Caleb's eyes. The steady beep of a heart monitor pulled Lydia from the darkness. She blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights, gradually becoming aware of the sterile hospital room surrounding her. Pain throbbed at the back of her head, intense despite whatever medication they had given her. As consciousness fully returned, so did the memory of what had happened at Caleb's house. Fear lanced through her. Where was Hazel? Was she safe? A nurse entered the room, noticing Lydia's open eyes. "You're awake," the nurse said with a professional smile. "How are you feeling?" "My head," Lydia murmured in a raspy voice. "It hurts." "That's to be expected," the nurse replied, checking the monitors. "You sustained a serious concussion, but you're going to be okay." She made some notes on her clipboard. "Your husband and daughter have been waiting to see you, and there are some police officers who'd like to speak with you when you're ready." Relief flooded through Lydia at the mention of Hazel. "My daughter, she's okay. She's fine," the nurse assured her. "A brave little girl from what I hear. Shall I send them in?" Lydia nodded, wincing at the pain the slightest movement caused. A few minutes later, Nick entered the room holding Hazel's hand. The little girl broke free and rushed to the bed, careful not to jostle Lydia, as Nick had clearly instructed her. "Mommy, you're awake," Hazel exclaimed, her small face lighting up. "I was scared when you were sleeping for so long." "How long was I unconscious?" Lydia asked, as Nick reached out to stroke Hazel's hair. "About 3 hours," he replied, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit with a baseball bat." Lydia attempted a weak joke before turning serious. "What happened after I blacked out? How did you find us?" Nick pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, lifting Hazel onto his lap. "I never made it to the hospital with my parents. I kept thinking about that phone call you got at the campground. How strange you were acting afterward when I tried calling you and couldn't reach you. I got worried." He reached out to take her hand, but it was Hazel who saved her. "After Caleb attacked you, you called 911. You told them that your mommy needed help," Nick recalled softly. Lydia turned to Hazel in amazement. "You called 911, sweetheart?" Hazel nodded proudly. "Just like you taught me. I used to phone in the kitchen when the scary man hurt you. I don't want him to be my daddy. I love Nick." Tears welled in Lydia's eyes as the weight of it all hit her. The close call, the terror, and how her daughter's quick thinking had saved her. Pulling Hazel close, she whispered, "You're such a smart, brave girl, and yes, sweetheart. One daddy Nick is more than enough for us." Later, as the police arrived and Caleb and Maya were taken into custody, Nick explained they're both in custody now. A knock at the door interrupted them. 2 police officers entered, nodding politely. "Mrs. Heron," one began, "we're glad to see you awake. I'm Detective Wilson, and this is Officer Garcia. We'd like to ask you some questions about what happened today, if you're feeling up to it." Lydia nodded cautiously, mindful of her throbbing head. "Of course." The detective then explained, "We were able to apprehend Caleb Miller and Maya Miller as they were attempting to leave the house with your daughter. They're both facing multiple charges, including kidnapping, assault, and false imprisonment. We also located the camper van they used at the campsite. It was abandoned in an empty warehouse about 10 miles from Oakage Town Center. Based on the tire tracks and timeline, they arrived there approximately 30 minutes after leaving the campground with your daughter. That must be where they switched to their family car," Lydia said, pieces falling into place. "Caleb always kept an Audi sedan in the garage. They probably left the camper to avoid detection since he would have been looking for it." Detective Wilson nodded. "That matches our theory. We even found some of Hazel's belongings in the camper, a stuffed rabbit and some drawings she did at the campsite. Hazel excitedly exclaimed, "Mr. Bunny!" Officer Garcia assured her with a smile, "We'll make sure you get him back, sweetheart." The detective then turned back to Lydia. "Now, Mrs. Heron, your husband mentioned that Mr. Miller contacted you at the campsite. Can you tell us about that conversation?" Lydia took a deep breath, knowing what she had to do. "Actually, there's something I need to tell you first." Glancing apologetically at Nick, she continued, "Something I should have told everyone a long time ago." Nick frowned in confusion. "Lydia, what are you talking about?" she began, her voice trembling. "The reason I didn't report Caleb immediately when I saw him in that photo is because he blackmailed and threatened me. He said if I went to the police, he would tell them about my past." Turning to the officers, she continued, 5 years ago, before I was married to Nick, I stole money from the company I worked for, about $15,000. I used it to feed my drug addiction and pay off debts. I manipulated the company's books, and innocent employees were fired based on suspicion." The officers exchanged glances as Detective Wilson began to take notes. "When Caleb went to prison for attacking me, he didn't tell the police about what I'd done. He said it was for Hazel's sake, so she wouldn't be born with her mother in jail. But now he's using it against me to try to take her away." Nick's face went pale. "Lydia, why didn't you tell me?" he asked softly. Tears streamed down her face as she admitted, "I was ashamed. I was afraid I'd lose you and Hazel if you knew the truth." Facing the officers, she said, "I understand I'll be prosecuted for what I did, and I'm prepared to face the consequences. I just need to know that my daughter will be safe while I'm gone." The officers questioned her further about the embezzlement, dates, amounts, methods, as they took detailed notes for their report. "You will face charges for these crimes," Detective Wilson confirmed. "We'll need to coordinate with the Financial Crimes Division. As for your daughter, that will be up to the family court to decide." Hesitantly, Lydia asked, "Will the court consider a statement from my therapist about my recovery?" "It will certainly be taken into account," the detective assured her. Lydia nodded, relief mingling with her anxiety. At least there was hope. After the police left, promising to return the next day for a formal statement, Lydia turned to Nick, expecting anger or disappointment. Instead, he looked at her with a complex mixture of emotions. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked again softly. "I was so afraid of losing you both," Lydia admitted. "I just couldn't bear the thought of it." Little Hazel then spoke up in a serious tone, "Mommy, are you going away?" Lydia swallowed hard, looking into her daughter's innocent eyes. "For a little while, sweetie, I did something wrong a long time ago, and now I need to make it right. Will you come back?" Hazel's voice quavered. "Of course I will," Lydia promised, squeezing her daughter's hand. "And while I'm gone, you'll stay with Daddy, Nick, and Grandma and Grandpa. They'll take good care of you." Hazel considered this and then asked, "What about the other man? Is he still my dad too?" Lydia exchanged a glance with Nick before answering carefully, "Caleb is your biological father, yes, but Nick is your dad in every way that really matters. He loves you and takes care of you every day." Hazel nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation. As Lydia watched her daughter snuggle against Nick's chest, a strange sense of peace settled over her despite the uncertainty of her future. She had finally faced her past and told the truth. Whatever consequences came, she would face them knowing that she was finally doing the right thing. Sometimes love meant making difficult choices. Sometimes it meant sacrificing your own freedom to ensure your child's safety and well-being. And sometimes it meant finding the courage to be honest no matter how painful the truth might be. For the first time in years, Lydia felt worthy of her daughter's love. Not because she was perfect, far from it, but because she had finally found the strength to be honest, to take responsibility, and to put Hazel's needs above her own fears. Subscribe now for more moving and unforgettable stories, and join our community to stay updated on every new chapter in this epic journey of redemption, courage, and love.